know you're deeply disappointed because last week in Luke chapter 15, I promised you that it was a three-part thing, three parables. The parable of the lost coin, the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. Well, guess what? No. The parable of the prodigal son, the lost son, was back in Lent. They pulled a fast one on me. So this week, I'm looking at the lecture cycle all week. I'm going, I'm going to have to get sick and skip church on Sunday because I can't face you. You're going to be bitter about this because you were expecting. All right, so we're in for a treat today. Why is this? This is a parable that you really have to pull out all the stops to figure out what's going on here because this is really a difficult parable. I talked to Jenna a few minutes ago because she's the Sunday school superintendent, my daughter. And she says she's been trying to take the lectionary reading and teach a little bit to the kids. I said, pass on this one. You know what I mean? This is a really tough one here. But we can handle this. We're over 21. We're adults. Are you ready to go to work on this?
Yep.
Because it's a toughie. You're going to have like blood trickling out of your ears by the end of this one. You're like, I can't take it. It's too complex. Okay, you can do this though. All right, now. First of all, what is the year right now? 2019. Did Jesus write or say this parable to be spoken in Rhinebeck in 2019? No. This is 2,000 years ago. So it's 33 AD. He's on his way to Jerusalem. There's a big crowd of people following him, just like we've had for the last several weeks. And he tells them a parable, earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Is this an earthly story? Yeah. Dishonest business dealings? Are you kidding me? Right? It happens all the time. I always follow the business news, because I teach economics sometimes. I want to know what's going on in the business world. Usually there's some white-collar criminal being indicted or something. We love this stuff, right? Well, that's what this is. Now, before we progress on, let me talk about what this is. This is called the parable of the dishonest steward or the dishonest manager or the unjust manager. You can call it any one of those titles. Now, what do we do with something like this? You can't use it in a Sunday school lesson. There's no moral and ethical lessons here, So what do you do with it? Here's what you do. You say to yourself, what is it? What are we dealing with here? What is the genre? What is this thing? You've heard of Carl Jung before? He does archetypes, okay? This is an archetype called the trickster. In Norse mythology, Loki, the Hermes in Greek mythology. It turns out that this archetype of the trickster is a universal thing. Incest is a universal taboo. The trickster is in like African American, Uncle Remus, Brer Rabbit, Tar Baby, all that stuff. It's in Native American stories and myths. It's in Slavic myths. It's in Chinese myths. It's in Jewish legends. It's even in the Bible. Jacob, you've heard of him before, right? Jacob and Esau. Who is he? His name literally means heel grabber, right? Because Esau is born first and Jacob grabs him and pulls him back down again. Jacob is a trickster. You can just see ancient Jews sitting around the campfire telling the stories with great delight how Jacob, their ancestor, tricked Esau, okay? So the trickster, this is what this is. This is a trickster thing. And it's popular, it's a universal thing, okay? So this is a story about a trickster. And what do tricksters do? Well, they cross boundaries. They cross barriers. They do things that are socially unacceptable, even criminal, right? That seem to be smarter than everyone else. You probably knew a kid like this in school, They seem to be smarter than the teachers, and they're smarter than everybody. That's the trickster. Okay? So the trickster motif. So this is a trickster story. That helps a little bit when you read this, right? Okay? I'm talking about Columbus this week in my history classes, right? You ever heard the story of the Columbus's egg? You know that story? All right. Columbus is spending 8 years trying to convince Ferdinand and Isabella to bankroll his voyage to go to China. He thinks he can go west to get to China. And everybody says, no. So the expert theologians and geographers are all gathered in one room, and Columbus is trying to convince them that this is a great idea. And he's just a common guy. Doesn't have a university education. He's not a theologian, right? Not a churchman. So Columbus says to them, okay, see this egg, right? Balance this egg. So what do? They try to balance the egg, it falls over. Another guy tries, he can't do it. Finally they go, we give up, we can't balance the egg. So what does he do? He takes the egg and he goes like this, cracks it, and it stands up. What's the point? It's a trickster. You see this? So he found a new way to solve a problem of balancing the egg, to make the egg stand up on end. And in the same way, when Columbus says, I think we can sail west to get to China, you see how that works? If you can do something, a little trick like this, small, then when it comes to something big, then maybe you've got something. That's the trickster motif. So here we go. Let's go to work on this thing. Then Jesus said to his disciples, stop. Who's this parable aimed at? Back in chapter 15, he's talking to the Pharisees that are traveling along with him, collecting evidence to try to get him. Here, he's talking to his students. Who would that be? That's us. Okay, so he's talking to his disciples, his students. And he says, there was a rich man. Stop. Do we love this stuff? Yeah. Anything involving the Kardashians, right? My dopey college kids, they know nothing. But they're experts on the Kardashians, right? They're experts on this. They watch this show on TV. It's about lifestyles of the rich and famous people. Nobody that I know lives like this, but this is how they live in Hollywood. So it's a story of a rich man. Who are you? You're a peasant 2,000 years ago. You're a tenant farmer. You have to pay rent. And so he's telling you a story about a rich man. This is great. Do we like rich people? Boo! We don't like rich people, right? So Jesus is telling us a little story.
Except when we want their money.
Yeah, then you like them, right? So here, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're my good friend. Yes. Well, here the rich man is about to get it. Okay, he's about to get tricked. He's about to get, the
egg.
Yeah, the egg trick. He's about to get this now. Here, I didn't mean to ruin the story, but okay. So the rich man, he is a manager, a steward. Okay, and who are we? We are stewards of God's possessions. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, right? And I saw this when I went to Minnesota, right? My ancestors went there. They came from Norway. They homesteaded the land. They plowed the land. And what happened? The land broke them. Then the next generation came. They plowed the land. That one died. Plowed the land. That one died. Guess what? The land is still there, and all my ancestors are dead. The earth goes on eternally. But our bones get crushed by the land itself. So the earth is the Lord. Even if you own title for your house, you don't really own the house, right? I think about this all the time. Mrs. Isaacs, we live up there. I'm the 31st minister in this church, number 31, okay? That house was built in 1870, right after the Civil War. So pictures that we have in the back of the church here, they used to live in that house right there. So I walk down the hall and I think, yeah, they used to live here. It's amazing, isn't it? Right? So anyway, this rich man, he is a steward, he is a manager, right? And charges were brought against the manager that he's been squandering the property of the rich man. Okay? Now, this is not a good thing, right? So what happens then? Well, so he summons, it's the big IRS audit, okay? So the books have been audited, and the rich man summons the steward, and he says to him, what is this that I hear about you? Okay, stop. What is this that what about you? Hear. Why is that? Very few people can read and write in the ancient world, and there's a gossip network. So it comes through the grapevine that this guy is a shady character, okay? And who is the rich man? He's an absentee landlord. So again, in the ancient world, you don't live in like a two-family house and you rent out the other side. More like you live in Manhattan and you rent out a farm up here and you hire somebody to take care of the property and collect the rents. That's what this is. Civilized people, civitas people in the Roman world live in cities. They don't live in the country. So he's an absentee landlord who comes around maybe once a year to kind of see what's going on. And I hear rumblings about you, dude. Okay? So, give me an accounting. Right? Tell me what you've been up to. Then finally, the rich man makes a decision. You're fired. Right? You're fired. You can't be my manager anymore. Okay? Now, I love this one. Then the manager says to himself, who does he say it to?
Himself.
this is an interesting thing that Jesus uses. In our literature, we're used to having introspective, like internal conversations. So Jesus has this guy doing an internal conversation. And again, what is that a sign of? He's a trickster. He probably doesn't have any friends. He's alienated everybody, right? The only friend he has to talk to is himself. If I get in trouble, I call up Dave Barkstead or somebody and talk to him about it, right? Because I have like people you can talk to. He doesn't have anybody to talk to, so he's his own counsel. Again, who's smarter, 10 people or one person? 10 people, okay? So he doesn't have any friends to elders to talk to. He's by himself, and he has to reason it out himself. So let's see what he does here. He says, what am I going to do? Right? He's working out the scenarios in his head, right? If you take Prozac, it'll stop that, right? He's like reasoning it out in his head. He's like, oh, what am I going to do? Now that my master has taken my position away from me, stop. What does it mean to have a position like this? In the ancient Near East, right, it's a patriarchal society, client patrons. So again, think of Tony Soprano, Sicily, Mediterranean culture. That's what we're dealing with here. So what does it mean? Tony Soprano is the patron, you're the client. He picks you to be in charge of the pork store in New Jersey or something. What happens if you take money from Tony Soprano? Bad news, okay? So patron client, he's violating the trust of the patron. This is not a good thing, okay? So he knows he's in big trouble. He goes, what am I going to do, right? I'm not strong enough to dig, right? So he can't like sell his physical labor in order to survive, right? My hands are all soft, You ever shake hands with somebody who actually works for a living? They have like tough hands, Well, his hands are soft hands, right? He can't dig holes, right? And I'm ashamed to beg, right? Well, why is begging a bad thing? Well, honor shames society, right? You don't go out there and beg it like it's a dishonorable thing. It's a shame to do this, He was once a great man. Look at him now. Now he's going around begging, right? So he doesn't want to do either scenario. It's a worst case scenario either way. He can't work and he can't beg. So in other words, he's a white-collar criminal. You see how this works? Okay? So then what does he do? He's the trickster. That's what he does. Here's what he does. I know what to do. What is this? First-degree murder, premeditated murder. He's got a plan, doesn't he? Okay? I know what I'm going to do. Then he worked it all out in his head, right? Just like the parable that I'm not talking about today, the parable of the lost son. Remember that? What does he do? On the way home, he has the whole thing mapped out in his head. What is he going to do? Right? He has the whole dialogue all figured out with his father. Well, this guy, he's working it all out, right? He goes, oh, this is going to be great. So, I know what I'm going to do. He summoned, again, why is he going to do this? He has a plan so that he will be welcomed in other people's homes after he loses the position. What does that mean? It means like, oh, Mrs. Isaac says, this couple invited us over for dinner. Now we have to invite them over for dinner. You know what I mean? So that's what they do in the ancient world, right? It has to be equal balance sheet. If somebody does you a favor, you have to do them a favor. So he's going to do favors to people so that they'll pay him back later on down the pike. This guy's a trickster. He's got the plan. Okay? So what does he do then? He says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. So he summons his master's debtors. Stop. Who is he calling?
The master's
The
debtors.
people that, so these, who are the debtors? These are sharecroppers, tenant farmers that the trickster here is supposed to be in charge of. Now, here's an interesting thing. Whose money is this? Again, the earth is the Lord's, the landlord and so on. But the steward has a lot of discretion here. So it's not really clear. He might have been taking his own profits and sacrificing that. See what I mean? So in other words, it might not be as criminal as you would think it is. So he's not taking money from the landlord. Maybe he's taking his percentage. Remember how tax collectors, how they collect money for the Romans? They get like a commission. Well, he's reducing his own commission maybe. That's one way of maybe understanding this, right? But anyway, let's go. So he calls in one debtor, and he says to the first one, how much do you owe my master? Right? Now, I love this. If he was a good steward, wouldn't he know how much the debt would be? Isn't that interesting? He makes the person say it. And is he a trickster? He's really tricky. Here's what he does. Listen to this. You got to admire this. It's just evil, right? 100 jugs of olive oil. Okay, stop. You better stop here. The Roman economy in the 1st century AD, what are the three legs of the Roman economy? Corn, wine, and oil. Corn is wheat, barley, oats. Olive oil, they don't have petroleum yet. And wine, because if you drink the water, you're going to die. Corn, wine, and oil. So Romans are interested in anything that does that. Olive oil is fantastic. You can do anything with it. You got to cut heels in, you put it in your hair, you put it in your food, you burn it in lamps, you do all kinds of stuff with it. So what does he do? He says, 100? Okay. Take your bill and make it 80. Okay, stop. Who changed the bill? Who changed the bill? Yeah, isn't that interesting? That's not my handwriting, that's his handwriting. I'm not the one that did it. The guy's a trickster right down to the micro level. You got to admit, I mean, this is so rotten that you have to admire it, okay? So, make it 80. And, make it 50, all right? Sorry, it's a 50% cut, right? And how much would this be worth? Well, different commentators talk about this. They said both of these bills, the olive oil and the wheat, could be worth up to 500 denarii. Remember what's a denarii? You take a dime. Silver, solid silver dime, that's about how big it is. It's 1 day's pay for an average worker. So this is like a year and 2/3 pay for an average worker. This is like serious money. You get $10,000 or something, it's a lot of money, right? It isn't like little bottles of olive oil you get at the Tops or something, right? So make it 50, okay? Then he said to the other one, how much do you owe? And he says, 100 containers of wheat, we'll make it 80. So one is a 50% reduction, the other is 20% reduction. Very interesting, okay? Now, and guess what? The master hears about this. Why? Because in the ancient Near East, it's gossip network. That's where you get your news from, not on TV or not through Facebook or something. It's the gossip network. Well, through the grapevine, guess what? It turns out. And what does the master say? Now, you would think the master would be really disgusted with this, but no. He kind of smiles a little bit. It's like a joke, isn't it? He played the joke on me, this trickster did, right? It's so evil and creepy and odd and flipping the tables on it. It's like Columbus's egg, right? You can't do that. That's against the rules. You have to balance the egg. No, he breaks the egg in order to make it balance. So that's what he's doing. So tricksters think outside the box. They do things that are maybe a little sketchy, a lot sketchy. They break down the walls, they break the barriers. And you know what? These people always get away with it.
Yes, they do.
I used to teach in prison. Best job I ever had, a captive audience. Fantastic. I love teaching in prison. These guys, you want to just smack them, right? They're really intelligent guys. They're really smart. And they love to talk about what got them into prison, like the scam that they pulled, mail fraud or something. And there are these complex Rube Goldberg elaborate plots and schemes, and the moral of the story is when they get out, they're going to do it better this time and not get caught, right? But they kind of delight in the details of how the plan, It would be like, if you just go get a job and get paid minimum wage, you'll make a lot more money than you did on your complex scam. But that's no fun. The art of the deal, the scam, is what the fun part of it is. You see? So that's like this guy. So he says, so even the master, right? He commends the trickster for being so shrewd. You can see what I mean? Okay, Jenna, I want you to teach this to the Sunday school kids. Yeah, Addie's already this way.
Yeah.
You don't have to teach her this. My granddaughter, she knows how to work the system, right? So you got to admit, this is pretty neat. You can see why they crucified Jesus. He told stories like this. You can't tell stories like this to the Sunday school kids, right? Right? So the master is so rotten and so evil that he smiles, and he commends them, right? For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. Isn't that something? Right? And I tell you, what should you do? You need to make friends for yourself now by dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, you may be welcomed into eternal homes. It's amazing, isn't it? Right? Now, when Luke wrote this, he recorded this parable that Jesus told. I think even Luke himself blushes with this story. So rather than just saying, okay, we can go home now, no, he has to put a couple of logias in there. Logia sayings of Jesus, maybe to kind of calm it down or tone it down a little bit, right? Because it's kind of embarrassing that Jesus tells a story about this trickster guy who got away with it, right? So he says, all right, here's what Jesus says, right? See if Jesus can get out of his own parable. Whoever is faithful in very little will be faithful also in much. So in other words, do your duty on the small level, and then God will entrust you with greater things later on, right? And actually, this is a really good business management principle, isn't it? Do our students at the CI like this? No. They want to graduate and be the president of the college or the president of the Marriott Corporation, right? They don't want to start at the, cleaning fish in the back room. They want to start at the, be the head chef, right? So the kids always want to start at the top. Well, no, you're faithful in little things, and when you do a good job at that, then you get promoted and move up the ladder once you get experience. And if you've not been faithful with dishonest wealth, who's going to trust you with true riches, right? So you can't even, what's this? You can't even balance your own checkbook, and you want to be in charge of the federal budget? Yeah, that's a great idea. See how that works? Okay? And if you've not been faithful what belongs to another, who's going to give you what is your own? In other words, you can't manage other people's businesses, and you expect to have more authority and more power, right? He's pretty good stuff, right? Then, just to make sure, right? By this time, you probably have already forgotten about the parable. So Luke keeps putting this stuff in sayings of Jesus. I don't know where to put it. I'll put it right here. Then it'll deflect it or something, right? No slave can serve two masters, for you either hate one or love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You can only have one master at a time. You cannot serve God and serve mammon or wealth at the same time, right? So, what do we do about this story? Well, first of all, I would take a razor blade and cut this out of your Bible. Don't let anybody see you reading a story like this, because it's really not a good thing. Not good for Sunday school, right? But you have to admit, it's kind of an interesting story about the trickster story. And the idea is, Christians, we go through, my favorite line of The Tempest is what? By Shakespeare? How now, mooncalf? In other words, we're like born yesterday. We're very naive. Well, no, you have to be shrewd when you live in this world. Be shrewd. And focus on the one thing that is essential, and that is eternal life and the cross of Christ, death, burial, resurrection of Christ. That's what you have to focus on. Better end there. Amen.
Amen.